The spark no one saw coming. The helicopter was going to fall out of the sky, and everyone in that hangar knew it. 3 weeks. That was how long the world's most decorated aerospace engineers had been staring at this aircraft, running diagnostics, cross-referencing data, arguing in conference rooms, and walking away with nothing. The Crestline Aerospace X-7 prototype, a machine that represented 11 years of development and $4 billion in funding, had an electrical fault that no software, no algorithm, and no expert panel could locate. The laptop on the diagnostic cart read the same maddening words it had displayed for 21 days straight: "No faults found." And yet, every single test flight had ended with a near-catastrophic systems failure. One more failure in the air meant lives lost. The program was 48 hours from being cancelled permanently. If this story already has you leaning forward, if you believe that the overlooked ones sometimes carry the answers the world needs, then please take a moment right now to like this video, share it with someone who needs hope today, drop a comment below, and subscribe to Kindness Corner. We tell stories here that remind us what really matters. Jack Mercer was not supposed to be in that hangar. He was a level 2 maintenance technician, the kind of man whose name appeared at the bottom of org charts, whose coffee cup had been moved from the break room counter so many times that he'd stopped leaving it there. He was 43 years old, with grease permanently embedded under his fingernails and a daughter at home named Sophie who was 9 years old and believed, with her whole heart, that her father was the smartest man alive. Sophie didn't know about the world's top experts. She only knew that when her bicycle chain slipped loose, her dad fixed it in 40 seconds without looking up. She only knew that when the school's science fair project on circuits wouldn't light up, her dad sat cross-legged on the kitchen floor at midnight, tracing every wire with his fingers until the little bulb glowed. Sophie's faith in Jack Mercer was enormous and unconditional, which was more than could be said for anyone else in his life. Jack had been a widower for 4 years. His wife, Marie, had passed from an illness that came too fast and stayed too briefly for the world to seem fair. After she was gone, Jack sold the bigger house, took Sophie out of private school, and quietly rearranged his entire existence around being her father. He worked double shifts when overtime opened up and spent every dollar carefully. He packed her lunches with little notes that said things like, "You are braver than you know." He read engineering manuals at night, not because anyone asked him to, but because the problems in those pages were the only things that turned his grief quiet. Understanding how things worked, why a system failed, where energy went wrong, had always been the only language that made the chaos of life feel manageable to Jack. He had requested 3 times to be assigned to the X-7 diagnostic team. 3 times, he had been told the team was composed of senior engineers only. He wasn't bitter about it. He understood. He was Jack Mercer, level 2. He went back to his regular duties, servicing smaller aircraft on the east side of the hangar, and he watched the experts from a distance, the way a person watches a fire they are not allowed to approach. But Jack had been watching something else, too. Every evening when the senior team packed up and left, Jack would walk past the X-7 on his way to the locker room. He told himself it was just his route. But each time, he slowed down. He started noticing things, not with instruments, but with his eyes and his hands and the part of his brain that had been trained, not in university classrooms, but in years of touching broken things and listening to them. He noticed that the wiring harness along the rear fuselage sat slightly differently than the schematics showed. A barely perceptible curve. A tension that didn't belong. He noticed that the sparks during testing always initiated from the same 3-inch section of cabling that ran behind the auxiliary power coupling. He noticed that the diagnostic software was checking for faults in the active circuit pathways, but no one was looking at what happened in the passive state, when the system was in standby transition and current moved differently through the secondary grid. He wrote it down in a small notebook he kept in his chest pocket. He had filled 6 pages. On the 22nd day, Jack Mercer made a decision that terrified him. He came in early, before the senior team arrived, and he went to Dr. Elaine Corrigan, the lead systems engineer. She was a woman who had consulted on aerospace projects across 4 continents and whose credentials stretched longer than most people's careers. He stood in front of her with his notebook and his level 2 badge and his permanently stained hands, and he told her what he had seen. He expected to be dismissed in under a minute. Instead, Elaine Corrigan looked at the notebook. She read every page slowly. The hangar was quiet around them, just the hum of fluorescent lights overhead. Then she looked up at him, and something shifted in her expression, not embarrassment exactly, but the particular look of a person whose certainty has just been interrupted by the truth. She asked him to show her. Jack led her to the section of cabling he'd been watching. With gloved hands, he bent down and applied gentle pressure to the harness, not aggressively, just enough to replicate the vibration load of flight, and there it was. A microfracture in the insulation, invisible to any static scan, invisible to the diagnostic software, but present and catastrophic when the aircraft was airborne and the cable flexed under real conditions. In standby transition, the current arc was so brief that the system's sensors registered nothing. But it was there. It had always been there. The silence that followed lasted about 4 seconds. Then Elaine Corrigan called the entire team back in. What happened next unfolded with the strange, rushing energy of a problem suddenly released from its impossible state. Engineers who had been circling the X-7 for 3 weeks converged on that 3-inch section of cable with the focused intensity of people who finally had a coordinate to aim at. Jack stood to the side, watching, his notebook still in his hand. He wasn't asked to step back. For the first time, nobody moved him out of the way. The repair itself took 4 hours. The subsequent diagnostic came back clean for the first time in 22 days. When the laptop screen changed from red to green, there was a moment of absolute stillness in the hangar before someone started clapping. Then everyone did. Elaine Corrigan walked over to Jack and shook his hand. She held it for a moment and said something quietly that he would carry with him for the rest of his life. That evening, when he picked Sophie up from her after-school program and she asked how his day was, Jack Mercer, who had not cried in front of his daughter since the week they lost Marie, felt his eyes fill and had to look away at the sky for a moment. Sophie, without asking why, reached up and took his hand. She had always known. The experts had every tool, every credential, every resource. But the answer had been walking past the aircraft every evening in worn-out boots, writing in a small notebook that nobody asked to see. Sometimes the most important voice in the room is the one that was never invited to speak. If this story moved something in you, if you believe that quiet people carry profound gifts, if you know someone who works hard and goes unseen, please drop a comment below and tell us who that person is in your life. Let's honor them together right here. Before we close, we'd love to know, what single word describes Jack Mercer to you? Just one word, in the comments. Let's see what this community feels. The world will always need its experts. But every now and then, salvation arrives in a level 2 badge, a 6-page notebook, and a daughter who never stopped believing. Jack Mercer didn't save the aircraft because he was the smartest man in the room. He saved it because he never stopped paying attention, to the machine, to the details, to the quiet language of broken things asking to be understood. And sometimes, that is everything.